Welcome to Celestoria, your celestial escape into sleep. Here, every week brings a new soft sci-fi or fantasy bedtime story designed to help you relax and drift away. Close your eyes and subscribe so you never miss your next journey among the stars. The planet of Thalassa was unlike any other. Its sky shimmered with streaks of lavender and silver, as though dawn had been caught mid-breath and never quite exhaled. Towering above the valleys rose colossal flora, not trees in the earthly sense, but vast, intelligent growths with thick trunks of deep jade and leaves like glass sails, veined with liquid light. Their canopies stretched so high they vanished into the misted heights, where clouds glided between blossoms the size of amphitheaters. The air hung heavy with warmth and scent. Crushed fruit, flowering moss, mineral rain. Every breeze carried echoes of something older than memory, and the land beneath one's feet felt alive, humming faintly, like it dreamed in silence. Winding through a stretch of emerald thickets walked a young man named Amari. His skin was the shade of rain-warmed earth. His eyes held the calm of moonlit water. Coils of dark hair framed his thoughtful face, adorned with a simple bone clasp at the back. Across his shoulder hung a woven satchel, filled with hand-ground powders, vials of glimmering liquid, and sprigs of rare herbs gathered under starlight. Amari was a healer. Like his grandmother before him, a stern, wise woman who had treated wounds with clay and spirit alike. He walked the paths between instinct and science, between what could be touched and what could only be trusted. She had taught him to feel for fever not only on the skin, but in the breath of a plant, the tremor of air above still water, the rhythm of the wind. People came to him not only from his home settlement, but from the fringes of the jungle, the scorched borders of the desert, even the ocean's drifting isles. But healing had never made Amari feel whole. There was a quiet place inside him, not empty, not broken, but waiting for what he could not name. That evening, as the twin moons of Thalassa began to rise, one gold, one pale blue, Amari climbed a low ridge near the edge of the forest. Below him, the world stretched in soft waves of green and violet. Mist curled around tree roots like living smoke, and fireflies blinked into being among the ferns. He sat on a warm stone and opened a small journal. Pages worn with sketches of flora and notes scrawled in a careful hand. But before he could write, something shifted. The air thickened, not with heat or wind, but presence, as if someone or something had stepped into the fabric of the world beside him. He stood, alert. Leaves rustled, though no wind stirred them. And deep within the forest's shadows, a faint voice rose, rough and crackling, like old bark rubbed against stone. Not threatening, simply waiting to be heard. Amari moved carefully between the massive roots, each one broader than his shoulders, covered in soft moss that glowed faintly in the dimming light. forest here was older, quieter, but not silent. The usual chirps and rustles had stilled, replaced by a slow, deliberate rhythm. It was not just sound. It was a pulse, like breath held under the surface of a lake. He stepped through a veil of hanging vines and found himself in a clearing bathed in silver light. At the center, half wrapped in the trunk of a spiraling tree, stood a figure. Her robes were woven from lichen and smoke, their color shifting with each subtle movement, now green, now gray, now brown like ash. Her hair flowed down her back in tangled cords of vine and bone beads, and her eyes, black as obsidian, did not reflect the light, but drank it. Amari did not speak. Neither did she. They stood like that for a long moment, as if time had paused to listen. Finally, the woman raised one hand, gnarled, long-fingered, heavy with rings shaped like eyes, moons, and thorns, and pointed to the bracelet on Amari's wrist. Only there was no bracelet. At least, there hadn't been a moment ago. Now, a thin vine coiled his skin in a perfect circle, its color the same hue as fresh shoots in spring. Small thorns lined the edge, not sharp enough to pierce, but enough to remind. Her voice came low and slow, each word carved out of stone. "You feel it, don't you?" Amari hesitated, then nodded. "You were born with the thread of something rare. It pulls you forward, though you do not yet know to where." She stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the moss. "There is a woman, not far in blood, but far in space. Her soul is woven with yours. You are two seeds of the same bloom, and she has been taken." The words struck something deep, a note he hadn't known was inside him. "Who?" he asked quietly. The witch tilted her head. "You will know her when you see her, but beware. She is not waiting. She is fading. A sorcerer holds her in a prison of roots and bone, preparing a ritual to steal her life force, to make himself immortal and silence her forever." Amari stepped forward, fists clenched. "Where is she? Tell me." The witch's smile was slow and crooked, not unkind. "To reach her, you must pass through the 3 sacred lands of Thalassa, the desert of echoes, where your past will rise against you, the singing ocean, where forgetting will tempt you with rest, and the floating peaks, where pride waits to claim your purpose." She extended her hand and placed something in Amari's palm. A tiny crystal seed, warm and faintly pulsing. "This will guide you if your heart stays open." Amari looked down, then back, but the witch was already retreating, vanishing into bark and mist, like a dream returning to its root. The clearing darkened, the vines closed. He stood alone, but the vine bracelet on his wrist stayed warm. By the 3rd morning, the trees were gone. Thalassa's lush forests had given way to cracked stone, sparse thorns, and a widening silence. Amari walked alone, the shadows of giant stalks replaced by a white sky and blinding emptiness. desert of echoes was ahead. There were no boundaries to mark its entrance, only a subtle change in the wind and the way the light began to bend. Here the sand was not just sand. It shimmered with strange hues, rust red, opal, and pale gold. It hissed beneath his boots like it recognized him. The dunes shifted with no breeze, and shadows came and went without a source. Still, he walked. For hours, or perhaps longer, time unraveled beneath the heat. His breath grew shallow. Sweat carved paths down his back. The air pressed down not with force, but with expectation, as if the land itself waited for something to break. Then the first voice came. "You let him die alone." Amari stopped. The wind hadn't spoken, but something within it had. He turned. No one. "You weren't there, Amari. You left." His throat tightened. The voice was his younger brother's. His tone from years ago. Not angry, just tired, resigned. "Homiko, you found meaning in other people's pain, but never had the courage to face your own." The world around him shifted. Heat shimmered into form. He stood at the door of their old home, not a memory, but now. His brother lay inside on a narrow cot, feverish, eyes glassy. His own younger self stood at the door, hand on the frame, torn. And then he turned and walked away. The scene dissolved. Amari gasped. His knees buckled, and he fell into the sand. The grit burned his palms. He had always justified it, that he had gone to find medicine, that no one else would. But it didn't matter. The boy had died alone. A second figure emerged, tall, radiant, eyes like starlight. Kala. He hadn't seen her in years. She had loved him once, and he her. But he had buried that love under duty, under fear, left her without a word when she needed answers, when she had offered him her future. "You were afraid to be loved fully," she said. "So you disappeared, not to save the world, but to stay unbroken." Amari's breath came shallow. He gripped his chest. "Why are you showing me this?" he whispered. But he knew the answer. The desert wasn't punishing him. It was mirroring him, laying bare every echo he tried to silence, and the voices multiplied. "You weren't strong enough. You run from truth. You think healing others will erase your own failures." He covered his ears, but they rang inside him. The heat became unbearable, not from the sun, but from inside. Guilt, grief, shame, all the emotions he had packed into tight corners of his soul now rose like a storm. His vision blurred. He collapsed to the ground. Time passed. He lay motionless, chest pressed to the sand, his heartbeat distant. And then warmth. A pulse, faint but steady, from the vine bracelet on his wrist. It glowed softly, like a heartbeat answering his own. He reached toward it weakly. Suddenly, he saw not the illusions, but the spaces between them. The boy who did go for medicine, who tried, the man who walked away from love, not because he didn't feel it, but because he didn't believe he deserved it. He wasn't without fault, but he wasn't the villain either. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I was young, I was scared, but I'm still here, and I still choose to love." The whispers went silent, and in that silence, he felt something open inside him. He rose slowly, covered in dust and sweat, but steadier. The air had changed, lighter somehow. The desert no longer pressed on him. It listened. Before him stood a cactus, unlike any plant he had ever seen. Towering, crystalline, its petals shimmered with blue fire. It radiated peace and promise. He stepped forward and placed a hand on it. A petal fell into his palm, dissolving into warmth, sinking into his skin. He felt a clarity, not as lightness but as alignment. The sense that even broken pieces had meaning when you chose to carry them with truth. Amari turned toward the west. Far in the distance, a line of blue met the horizon. The ocean was waiting. But this time, he walked not to escape the past, but to move through it. The ocean met him like a breath held too long. It stretched endlessly, dark and luminous, catching the last light of day in waves that shimmered with bioluminescent veins. The shore was unlike any he had known. Instead of sand, it bore a carpet of smooth obsidian pebbles that sang softly when touched by water. The air tasted of salt and starlight. Amari stood still, boots half buried in the damp stones. The sea before him pulsed like something alive. Not just water, but memory. Whispering, inviting. Behind him, the desert faded into haze. Ahead, the singing ocean awaited. He had heard tales of it, a place where sailors lost names, where time folded into song, a place that could give peace or erase you altogether. At the edge of the shore, a vessel waited. It wasn't built, it had grown, a raft of living wood, its surface wrapped in vines, petals, and glowing tendrils that flickered in tune with the tide. As he approached, it bent slightly, as if bowing. Amari stepped onto it. The raft responded, not with movement, but with feeling. It knew where he was going. The ocean accepted him without a word. For hours, maybe days, they drifted across waters that shifted from violet to deep teal to black. The stars above were unfamiliar, constellations rewritten. The raft moved without wind, guided by silent currents and the faint shimmer of fish with glass-like scales that darted below. He didn't sleep. The sea didn't let him. Instead, it sang. Soft at first, a lullaby in a tongue he didn't know, but understood all the same. It hummed in his chest like a forgotten melody, something he might have heard long ago, in the womb, in a dream, in the roots of his blood. Then came the voices, not memories this time, not like the desert. These were new. Why chase pain when you could rest? There is nothing waiting but more sorrow. Be still, be free, forget. raft slowed. Shapes emerged in the water. Not solid, not ghostly, something between. Faces with gentle smiles, bodies gliding just below the surface. Their eyes glowed pale blue. They were beautiful. One, a woman with hair like flowing seaweed and silver rings along her arms, rose beside him. "We were like you once," she said, voice as soft as the tide. Carried burdens, longed for something distant. But it fades, love. Even pain fades. And when it does, you'll see it was all weight you didn't need to carry. She reached out a hand. Let go. You deserve peace. And he wanted to. He had known exhaustion before, but not like this. Not the kind that settled deep in his bones. His body ached from walking, fighting, remembering. His heart felt too full, stretched too thin. There was a part of him, raw and honest, that craved to be held, to sleep, to forget. Just for a while, he knelt at the edge of the raft, hand hovering above hers. The voices sang around him, a harmony of stillness. The stars above pulsed in rhythm. The ocean rocked like a cradle. Then, a flicker, not from the ocean, from within, a pulse on his wrist. The fine bracelet glowed faintly, and with it came not resistance, but memory. Nayara. Not her face, he hadn't seen it yet, but the feeling of her, the tug of something real, something unfinished. He remembered her voice in the witch's prophecy. She is not waiting. She is fading. If he let go now, she would fade alone. Amari pulled back his hand. "No," he whispered, "not like this." The sea trembled. The siren woman's smile flickered, then vanished. Her shape dissolved into mist, and the voices silenced like a cut string. The raft surged forward, as if the ocean had exhaled. Waves lifted him high, then dropped him low. The song of the sea twisted, no longer a lullaby, but a crescendo. He held tight to the living rails of the vessel as rain fell in bursts and the stars spun above. When the storm passed, the sky cleared. In the distance, cliffs rose from the ocean like shattered pieces of a broken sky. Floating stones suspended by nothing. The peaks of wind and light. The final trial was near. But more than that, he was certain now. She was real. And she was waiting. The mountain's peak vanished behind him as Amari entered the realm of wind and cloud. A narrow stone bridge stretched ahead, suspended high above the ground, connecting two cliffs that pierced the heavens. Beneath him, endless sky. Around him, clouds shifted like watchful spirits. As he stepped onto the bridge, a powerful gust of wind pushed against him. It wasn't natural. It carried presence, like a test wrapped in air. Suddenly, lightning cracked through the sky, and a floating structure emerged from the clouds. A temple made of glowing stone and crystal, hovering in the air like a forgotten throne of the gods. The path led straight to it. Inside, the temple was silent, empty yet alive. At its center stood a mirror, taller than a man, framed by wings of gold and vines of silver. As Amari approached, the mirror shimmered, and instead of his reflection, he saw a version of himself draped in royal robes, a crown of flame on his head. This version of him looked powerful, commanding, unbreakable. "This is who you could become," said a voice, not spoken aloud, but echoing in his mind. "Take the crown, lead the world, end the war between shadow and light." Amari stepped back. "This is not what I seek." The crown in the reflection pulsed, glowing brighter. "But you could. With power, you could tear the sorcerer apart. You could rule the skies. You could save her and remake the planet in your image." A sudden ache filled his chest. For a moment, he saw it. The ease of victory, the throne, the control over life and death, the temptation of absolute certainty. But then he remembered the girl's smile, the way she danced among wildflowers, barefoot, the way she once looked at him with hope, not fear. He remembered the healer's hands, his mother's lessons, his own promise. Love was not control. Power was not salvation. He stepped toward the mirror and whispered, "If I must win her by force, I've already lost her." The mirror cracked. Wind howled through the temple as the illusion shattered. The golden crown fell away. The royal reflection dissolved into smoke, and only his true self remained, tired, scarred, but free. From the broken mirror, a single feather drifted down, glowing with soft light. He caught it in his palm. The feather pulsed gently, then melted into his skin, leaving behind a mark on his forearm, the symbol of truth without domination. The temple began to fade, dissolving into mist. Amari stood again on solid rock, sky around him stretching wide and blue. The test had passed. He did not need to be a king. He only needed to be whole. The land was silent. Ash blanketed the ground like ancient snow, and jagged stones pierced the horizon. The air shimmered with heat, even though no sun broke through the smoky sky. Amari walked alone across the scorched terrain, his every step stirring black dust from beneath his feet. In the distance rose a monolith of obsidian, the hollow spire, a twisted tower of volcanic glass and forgotten spells. It pulsed with unnatural light. Within it, the sorcerer waited, and so did she. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with clarity. The trials had carved him open, emptied his pride, tested his strength. But what remained was unbreakable. Purpose forged in love. As he approached the spire, the earth rumbled. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked in a robe stitched from smoke and bone. The sorcerer's face was carved like stone, eyes like embers, voice like fire cracking through dry wood. You've come far, healer, but she is mine now. Amari stood tall, wind curling around him, the mark of truth still glowing on his forearm. She is no one's to own. The sorcerer laughed, a sound that turned the sky a shade darker. You think love can stand against power? I have bent stars to my will, burned rivers into ash. I will not give her up. And then the fire came. A wave of searing flame erupted from the sorcerer's hands, rushing toward Amari like a tide of fury. But Amari didn't run. He closed his eyes and breathed. The trials answered him. From the desert came the strength of silence. From the forest, the whisper of ancient roots. From the mountain, the clarity of stillness. From the sky, the gift of truth without domination. He raised his hands, not to attack, but to heal the wound between them. A sphere of light bloomed around him, not cold, not hot, but pure. The fire struck it, and for a moment, the world held its breath. Then the flames unraveled into petals of white light, drifting into the air like feathers. The sorcerer staggered. "What is this?" he hissed. "The thing you fear most," Amari said softly. "A power you can't control." The earth split behind the sorcerer. The tower trembled. From its broken walls, she emerged. The girl from the vision, wrapped in chains of shadow. But as Amari stepped forward, the chains fell away, dissolving like mist in sunlight. Her eyes met his, full of astonishment, and something older, recognition. The sorcerer, with a scream that cracked the sky, hurled a final spear of darkness toward them both. Amari moved without thought. He stepped in front of her, arms wide, but the darkness never reached them. The girl raised her own hands, and from her, a surge of blue-white light burst forth. Her own power, once suppressed, now awakened. The darkness shattered like glass in a storm. The sorcerer fell to his knees, powerless. The light faded. Silence returned. And then the wind, soft, warm, like breath after tears. The ash lifted into the sky, swept away by an invisible tide. The earth beneath them trembled once more, and life began to return. The black sand shifting, hints of green sprouting between cracks in the stone. The girl stepped closer. Amari looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, though he had dreamed of her for what felt like centuries. "You came," she whispered. "Always," he replied. They embraced, not as savior and saved, but as two souls who had found each other through fire. The curse was broken, and as they walked away from the ruins, hand in hand, the land behind them healed. Not because they commanded it, but because they chose love over control, healing over domination. Their story had been written not in prophecy, but in choice. And the world would remember it, not as the tale of a great battle, but of a greater love. They returned to the place where it all began, to the village of wide skies and red soil, where banyan trees cradled the wind and the rivers hummed lullabies of old. Amari stepped barefoot on the earth of his childhood, the roots of memory wrapping around his ankles like gentle vines. The villagers came out to greet them, some with tears, others with songs. They saw in Amari's eyes not just the boy who had left, but the man who had returned, changed, weathered, shining with something ancient and true. And at his side walked the woman of light. They did not speak of battles or curses. They spoke of love, of choosing to return. And in time, the village prepared for a wedding. It was held beneath the great banyan tree, where Amari's grandmother once healed wounds and hearts with her hands of knowing. Lanterns swayed in the branches like stars caught in leaves, and music rose like mist in the evening air. As night fell, the sky turned violet, and the moon, full and golden, rose above the hills. That's when they came, the spirits of the past, not with thunder, but with silence, soft as breath. The old healer, his grandmother, her form made of memory and moonlight, stood at the edge of the clearing. By her side, the desert winds that had taught him stillness, the forest shadows that had watched him grow. Even the mountain's quiet breath seemed to lean in, to listen. No one spoke of them, but everyone felt their presence. Blessing, witness, belonging. In time, a home was built near the water's edge, round and warm, open to the sky. And there they lived. They had 3 children, each born beneath a different moon, one with eyes like storm clouds, another who laughed in her sleep, and the youngest who spoke to fireflies as if they were old friends. Amari taught them not just to heal wounds, but to listen to the trees, to the wind, to the silences between words. And she taught them how love was not a spell, but a choice made each day, even in the quiet. Seasons turned. The banyan grew wider, the river grew deeper, and their story, whispered at dusk by old storytellers and sung by children chasing stars, lived on, not as a tale of a healer who saved a girl, not as a legend of a sorcerer defeated, but as a truth that love, when it is true, is the oldest magic of all, and that those who walk its path with open hearts and brave steps will always find home.